outlined stuff that is really outside of what we talk about every day. There's Brexit, there's what's going to happen in Europe, there's Mr. Trump, there's the China slowdown. Is there any good news underlying all of this for corporates based out of India in terms of what they can do in terms of outbound investments? I'm delighted to have with us Gaurav Singh. He's a director with Yati Capital. He has more than 20 years of experience in investment banking, M&A, hedge funds, and portfolio management. But he's one of the first few people who, I think sometime 15, 16 months ago, kept telling me that there's going to be problem in China and what that is going to do to the rest of the world. And he was so convincing that I said, write a column for CFO India. He wrote that piece and then gloated over the next few months saying, you know what, I got it right. This time he called me and said, I got it right last time. I have something more to share. So I'm delighted that he's come. He's based out of London. And over to you, Gaurav, to talk to us about outbound business. Please join me in welcoming Gaurav Singh.
My philosophy is don't lose that chance. So sorry for kind of doing that on a repeated basis. Can we get the slides on? So we've heard various versions of gloom and doom, not just here, but if you open the newspapers over the last 6 months or so, there's views on positions on problems that that can come up in various parts of the world. And there could be crises that are brewing, again, both from China to Europe to the US. There's always opportunity in a crisis. If you've seen the movie The Big Short, it talks about how very few people in the investment management community or hedge funds, they basically took a position against subprime and managed to make a lot of money. In pretty much every crisis, around 10% of people managed to do something positive out of the crisis, managed to create some opportunity out of the crisis. And, the rest survive, a few perish. And the key thing is you can only do it if you had the foresight, if you have some kind of inkling about what could be happening next, and then you are prepared to act so that you are positioned in a crisis better. So it's always good to talk about specifics rather than talking about generalities about how the world, where the world is going. So I've taken a few kind of specific examples of where there is trouble brewing or where there's an issue coming up, and we'll kind of go through these and talk about where the opportunity could be in these situations. I mean, the first has to be the UK. We've got Brexit, which has been dominating headlines, so just giving a nod to the fact that this has been kind of on the top of everybody's attention. And this is this is representative of the kind of pictures that you've seen again, people protesting about Brexit. This is actually very interesting from another perspective. Young people, like the ones who are holding this banner, most of them actually wanted to remain in the EU. And the whole debate was positioned as the old people wanted to leave, but the young people wanted to remain. And one way of looking at it is the millennials, which have been a topic of discussion, they have a more integrated view of the world. They are in a post-globalized society. And that's why they are okay with continuing that integration. And that's a good insight because I think that if you are talking about at the end of globalization, it's important to remember that the millennials or the young don't necessarily kind of share that kind of view of the world. But where's the opportunity here? I think that's our question, right? So I'll give a toffee to the person who tells me what this is. That taken for free from you. Any guesses? That's right, that's right. Maybe I can throw it like this. No, sorry. I'll give it to you personally. This is the Commonwealth. And what is important to remember is the UK is not just a part of the EU, but there is a separate identity that it has, a separate network that it has been very aligned to, which is the Commonwealth. And what happens when the main identity, which is its alignment with the EU, goes away or lessens? Well, I mean, this is the kind of headline that you see every now and then. This is from a newspaper in a city-based newspaper in London. And Theresa May actually has also been making statements about how they need to actually increase ties with the Commonwealth and improve the flow. So that is the opportunity. Actually, that's a very real opportunity for Indian companies, because it means that you're going to have a much more receptive audience for partnerships, JVs, investment. British companies would be looking much more towards their old network, because the EU position is now at risk or in danger. And there's also, obviously, if I talk about the opportunity in London, there's also the new financing route that has been opened up, which again, given London's position as the capital market center for the rest of Europe, is now a little bit shaky. They'll be very keen to encourage masala bonds, the first of which was done by IFC, but then there's been quite a few. I won't talk about masala bonds, but just wanted to point out that this is going to get a new fillip with what is happening. Let's talk about Germany. This is Merkel with the Prime Minister of China, Chen Jingbao. It's one of several meetings that keeps happening. When you think about China and its primary relationship in the world, mostly people get obsessed with the US. US and China, they depend on each other, but yet at the same time, they are fighting with there's a love-hate relationship. There is a currency war potential. There is China holds a lot of all sorts of things. But Germany is also a very significant relationship of China and vice versa. And what you have seen is that in the last 1 year or so, Chinese companies have been buying German companies like mad. This is KUKA. This is Germany's largest robo maker. And this is now significantly owned by a Chinese company. And in fact, a little bit of that love-hate again, because the lawmakers in Germany really didn't want that. So there was a lot of hand-wringing around getting the deal through. But it finally happened. But it's not just this. I mean, there have been a spate of Chinese buying, including they just recently bought one of the main piano makers, the guys who made pianos over the centuries for the German composers. And Germans are saying, what happened there. So this stuff has been there. But here's the problem. Here's the problem between China and Germany. That, the chart on the right, that's Germany's trade with China. You can see over the period of 15 years, basically it's gone from under 10 billion to it touched around 100 billion. But you can also see what happened in the last 2-3 years. And in fact, you can see in the bigger chart what's happening sector by sector over the last, this is basically between 2014 to 2015, and how German exports have been faring. So this is, road vehicles have gone down by 29%, and power generation machinery has gone down by 27%. You can guess what Germany, which is basically primarily a capital goods manufacturing economy, and that's where its strengths are, what happens when one of its main, really the main and dominant market for what it is really good at, when that kind of stops its capex and is trying to restructure itself to a more consumer-based economy, et cetera, et cetera. This is what happens. And what does that lead to? I think this is a really big opportunity, because it means that Germany will look for new significant partners, and maybe India could be one of that. But let's dig a little bit deeper, right? So where is that opportunity? The opportunity really is in what they call the Mittelstand, which is basically small companies, companies with less than 500 employees, less than 50 million turnover. That's where the bulk, that's what contributes to nearly 80% of the employment and more than 50% of the GDP. That's where the cutting edge innovation, et cetera, is happening. So that's where opportunity lies rather than the big companies. But how is access? Well, actually, when people, particularly I think the experience of many Indian companies when they try to access it reminds me of the name of a Bollywood movie. There's no entry. It's very difficult to gain access to these companies. The Germans, are not particularly interested because the Chinese have proven that they can do it. You need a more nuanced approach. You need to be more sensitive to what the regulations are and how the Germans think, and you definitely need to be more long-term. But if you can do all of that, then it's possible, and that's a significant opportunity. I don't want to talk too much about China. I think enough has been said. I just want to say one thing from Chinese perspective about what happens next. There is a possibility that there is one more serious leg down in the Chinese economy, and that we have a full-fledged banking crisis. And it's not, this is not out of the blue. There's been a lot of people who have talked about the absolutely stupendous growth of credit that has happened after the crisis, just so that China can basically maintain its own position after the crisis. And now you can see the NPLs are increasing, but they are increasing. They are still, the NPL levels are not particularly high yet in terms of percentage. But the banking system is much, much larger. And what happens if NPLs go to, let's say, even close to 20%, which they reached at the turn of the century? You have a full-fledged banking crisis. You have definitely a devaluation, a big devaluation coming. It's something to keep in mind, right? It might happen, or the Chinese, because in general they are pretty good and pretty smart people, they might be able to manage it. But it's something to keep in mind. Two facets to this. The first is that if you are very brave or if you are foolhardy, then this is actually a possibility of going out there and buying really cheap excess capacity, which is now up for sale as all of China restructures. So that is one opportunity, but you have to be pretty comfortable with what China is, of being able to operate in China for that. But I think the other side of looking at it is more an indirect benefit, because what you will find is that if something, if the juggernaut really kind of comes on its knees, you will find that it really equalizes the playing field much more between India and China, which has not been the case, as we all know. I just wanted to kind of, just do something left field, not something that people would typically look at. Let's say Italy. It's a significant economy in Europe. It's in the middle of a full-fledged banking crisis. It makes some news, but I think the way it's heading, it's going to make much more news. The crowds have already, if you read Italian newspapers, the pictures of the crowds lining up outside the banks are fairly regular. But it's also, not an economy that is doing particularly well. And I think the general feeling is, Europe is back. The economic troubles are back. Okay, the restructuring has been done. It's not. You see, this is youth unemployment. It kept after the crisis, which it was at 20%, it kept going up to between 40-45%. You can say it's stabilized, but what does that mean? Stabilized at 40-45%? So there's no solution to that problem. So what's the opportunity here? Well, I mean, when you think of Italy, obviously, you think of all the, Italian brands, and of course there's a lot of that. There's a lot of, it's got a big fashion industry, etc. But it's also got a very deep engineering sector. I mean, this is just the automobile segment over there. But I mean, the north of Italy, there's a lot of unknown or less famous names, which would be very happy in a slowing economy to look at new markets, to look at new partnerships, to look at stuff that they can somehow get out of, and and really have something to offer. So I'll take around 5-6 minutes on talking a little bit now on themes, stuff which is more common to across, let's say across the developed world, across the G10. And we think a lot about deep tech. What is deep tech? I mean, deep tech is also a particularly irritating type of electronic music that you would wish your children don't listen to, but that's not what we mean. Deep tech for us is the way in which cutting-edge technology is now increasingly being used in ordinary everyday products. And this is, I think, an area where India still has a significant disadvantage. So so this is an area of weakness because the pace of change with this that is happening in these areas and the technology that's being developed, there's a clear gap between India and Europe, US. And I think there's a very interesting proposition. And I've given the photo of the pioneers. These are the guys who were the first people who went to the west of the United States, to California, unknown land, and they were kind of explorers, trying to figure out. There is an opportunity, but I think that it needs to be figured out and tested. And not too many people have done it yet. I mentioned brand capital because they have done it. So they are the kind of, in this, the pioneers. Basically, a lot of deep tech is not being done by big companies, it's being done by startups. Now, you don't go to Europe to talk to startups. Normally, you don't. You talk to the big, but the startups are the ones where there is an opportunity and where there is a gap, because the startups need money. We'll give you publicity in their case, but pretty much, a lot of companies can give what they have to offer to those startups. And we'll maybe give you a little bit of capital, and we'll take care of India. Yeah. You give us the technology. You give us maybe, a position actually inside you as well. And you give us the ability. Now, if something gets made out of India, if the India presence, India rollout, it's fantastic. It's a great validation of the startups model. At the very least, they're getting some investment and, small amounts. Their game is much smaller. So it's an interesting situation. It's an interesting opportunity coming out of that. What kind of areas, I don't want to kind of delve into this, but clearly artificial intelligence, machine learning. This is Google DeepMind. Google acquired this in 2014. Basically a bunch of guys in a room which they acquired for $400 million. And people are wondering what they're doing. But these guys have already, established some of the core technologies of Google. Again, not much being done in India in machine learning, in AI. So AI, Internet of Things. Interesting kind of point of view on that is, the Internet of Things is something which is kind of premised on building technology on top of the manufacturing sector or the services sector, or building something on top of what is already there. So European companies are quite well positioned to do IoT, simply because they have the manufacturing base. So as opposed to the, the unequal advantage that the US has, industry look at renewables. I mean, just the same way that a CFO would look at oil price. You need to look at what's happening in renewable, because that's basically going to determine where your cost of energy is going to be. But there's a lot of, again, interesting technologies coming. Particularly, this is a battery, proposed battery kind of unit. And that's one of the areas where a lot is happening. So deep tech. The other area, as I say, as a theme is, we need to, in India, really kind of think about distress and the opportunities, because that's where, we are all value seekers by nature. We understand where value is, and we go there, and we get interested when the value is there. Well, if problems occur in China or in Europe or anywhere else, there's going to be distress. What happens? Oy. Yeah. What happens when there's distress? The number of companies that kind of go out of business or in trouble goes up, as you've seen in 2000 and in 2008. And what happens then? I took this from a cloth shop. Basically, when it happens, you get a cut price, but it's as applicable to a company as a clothing shop. So that's if we see a round of kind of serious issues coming up in China or in parts of Europe, or maybe post-Brexit in the UK, if companies which are very dependent on the EU no longer find it possible to do business in the same way, then that's an opportunity. And what you have to think about in those circumstances is, keep your powder dry so that you can act on that. And on the other hand, I think, you need to be prepared and have the courage to go into a distress situation, because it's not easy to go into a distress situation and say, okay, I have the capability of turning this around. It's not, so there's a lot of kind of confidence building that needs to go before you get into that kind of situation. Otherwise, you yourself can get into distress, which I think some Indian companies have had that experience, and that's something to. So I'll close. I think we started with this theme: is Brexit the beginning of the end of globalization? We don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. But let's say it is. So what does that mean? What would I say that implies in terms of Indian companies trying to go international? What's the kind of direction? I would say it's time to invest. Because if globalization slows down, the only way that you will get access to markets that you are aspiring for is by having a presence there. So you can't have a distant relationship with these markets. You need to be there. If you are there, you are kind of more protected, or you're pretty much protected, because you become more local. And I think that that's something to think about. So I'll leave you with that. Open to questions. I hope not.
A day are the aspects which, with all this turmoil and the change, which come to your mind in terms of the next, I would say, shaping for the next maybe 2020, as I would say. Any views on that?
So industries which become attractive from an acquisition perspective, or industries that you need to be present? Huh?
Attractive, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you're talking about attractive, what's the attractive opportunity? Think about what's being sold to China right now, right? Let's say in Europe. Think about what China is taking up. And then create a scenario that China is no longer there, right? Or is there, but you have 50% of China. So what happens? That's where the opportunity to step in comes. And it could be anything. It could be going yourself and addressing that market, or it could be acquisitions or partnerships, or looking at companies which get affected and offering a kind of solution to that. But that's, I think, one of the big things that is going on. The other opportunity is I think, for India, it's always tech. It's always tech. And particularly, given what is happening in the last 4 or 5 years, the accelerating change of key technology, cutting edge stuff like blockchain, which is going to completely impact all of finance and fintech, like AI and machine learning, which is going to change a lot of business models and make a lot of people and employees as well as businesses redundant. You have to keep a lookout on these developments, because this then becomes, it comes all of, in a period of 2 years, it comes and changes your business. But you also have to look at enhancements. So, so not just what can trouble your business, but how does your own business. IoT, I think, is a good example of what can basically kind of enhance or build a bigger business on top of what you already have. But I mean, that's all tech. Tech is, I think, a big theme, according to me.
Hi, Gaurav.
Yeah.
So, Gaurav, my question is actually with regards to the slide that mentioned if this is the beginning of the end of globalization. Now, if we talk about China, they've actually been known to devalue their currency artificially, protect their industry. We've known about Amazon struggling there. We recently heard about Uber, getting merged. While it is being said it was merged, we know that Uber had to eventually give in China. Now, the consequence of that is that all of these big boys, Amazon, Uber, will now be training their guns in India, coming with the big dollars as investment, which would actually make it difficult for our own star players like a Flipkart or an Ola to be able to actually fight the battle. Now, there are two views to the situation. One view is that maybe we should also go the China way and protect our people, our star companies. And the other view is that maybe we shouldn't, because that will then not foster innovation. What would you actually go with between the two views?
I think a combination of both approaches, because what is sensible in one sector might not be sensible in the other sector. There might be certain sectors where you feel there's so much value, which an early mover can simply come in and take. Let's say just insurance. So you need, why don't you put some blocks in place, or retail? But across, if there's a sector like, so let's say deep tech, if you desperately need it and you can't get it in-house, then you need to kind of really open the doors and allow them in. Otherwise, you lose critical advantage. I mean, in renewable, in solar, in wind we are okay, but in solar, we're pretty much kind of, the game is over and we lost to the Chinese a long time ago. It's because we didn't have the opportunity to kind of develop it when we should have. But again, in solar, there's new technologies coming which could change the game again, and there's still another new chance for Indian companies to gain a seat on the table. We can discuss that later.
Yeah, I think we're going to close the session. I just want you to answer one last closing question, which is that outbound investment. Is that because the opportunity outside is so attractive? Because the rest of the world is looking at India as the only last bastion of growth and opportunity left? And the second thing is that most companies, and this is one of the big problems in the economy, that Indian corporates are not actually investing in India. So what if they don't have surplus funds or money to invest, then what is your expectation of them being able to invest overseas?
So the first question, I would say it's not just, the clock is reversing a little bit in terms of globalization. Then you have to be outside. You have to have a presence outside. Just to maintain your existing position or your existing plans in these markets. You don't really have a choice. So that's basically more like contingency planning. In terms of capital, well, I mean, you've got to figure out at the end of the day where the criticality lies. If you are a very domestic focused business, yeah, that's fine, but there'll be businesses which are much more outwardly facing.
I have to close the session now.
Thank you,
We'll
guys.
move into our last session.